The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. This is the home for Autism Live. It is also the home for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm so thrilled to be here with you on this Monday and almost mid-September, right? I do love this time of year. I say that all the time. I do. I love this time of year. It's a really great time. We are going to be with you for the next hour talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective, because no matter how you have come to this community, we have all kinds of things that are different, all of us, right? We may look different, we may pray differently, we may eat differently, right? We may think differently, we may perceive differently. But the one thing that I think, if you're watching this show, that we all have in common is that we love someone who's on the autism spectrum. And that may be yourself. Right? Self-love is great. It may be your spouse, it may be your child, it may be your adult child, right? It might be somebody in your classroom. It could be your brother, your uncle, whatever, but we all love and care very deeply about somebody on the autism spectrum, and we want to help them to be able to get the resources and support that they need so that they can lead the life that they choose to lead, right? So that's what we have in common. That's the thing that binds us together, and I call that the larger autism community, and I certainly am a part of that, and I welcome you because I know that you are a part of that. I am an autism mom, and I'm not an expert in autism. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I'm thrilled to be here with you, and I want to connect with you. So Traven is going to show you some of the different ways that you can connect with me and connect with the show and connect with the experts that we will have on the show so that you can have your thoughts, your feelings, your questions, your concerns voiced if you choose to. I will say that of all the things that he's showing you, there's one in particular that I want to make sure you know about, and that is our homepage, which is autism-live.com. When you go there, there's so many different things that you can do. You can watch the live show, but you can watch all the recorded live shows. You can go through the archives and search topics. It's crazy what you can do. You can say, I only want to watch videos with Dr. Temple Grandin in them. How many do you have, Shannon? And you will see we have a lot. You can say, I only want to hear the discussion about toilet training for adults. Hey, we've got videos for that too. So definitely check it out. And at the bottom of the page is something called the chat. If you click there, it opens up a box and you can have a conversation with me almost in real time. And just know that I'm only there talking on that when the show is live. And so there are other ways for you to connect as well, Facebook, YouTube, all of those different ways. Thrilled to have you whichever way you like. We want you to be a part of the conversation. So we do have a great show for you today. Talk about experts. We have experts on the show. I always say, love to have the experts on the show. Just don't confuse me as being one of them. Not an expert, but I do have an informed opinion. Very informed opinion. So vary on the opinion, not so much the informed. In any case, on Mondays, we like to start the show with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani are those experts talking about? What does this have to do with me? What does this have to do with the world? Why do I even care? I haven't had enough sleep and I'm overwhelmed. Why should I bother knowing this? Well, The reason why you need to learn these terms a little bit at a time is because ultimately when you know and understand them, they will save you time, money, and energy. Ugh, right? How about having more of those three things, right? And it will help to propel you to get the things that we talked about at the beginning of the show, that, you know, the resources and the support and the ability for the person that you care about on the spectrum to achieve what is important to them, right? That's where the jargon comes into play. So today's term is an oldie but a goodie, and we cycle back on it because it's one of those terms that will come up endlessly, especially the school system. Look, I'm a former teacher. I love teachers, but they do like their jargon, right? And they like to use acronyms, and it's a way of making us all feel that we don't know what's going on, right? So why not flip that equation and really know what's going on? So, and I don't think that people do it just to make us feel stupid. I don't think that it's just for that. But I think they get used to using those terms. They know what it means, and they forget that you don't. So today's term is receptive language. And you're going to hear teachers talking with you about receptive language and expressive language. And they will use this term a lot in the classroom, referring to a child and say, well, the receptive language is not where we need it to be. Okay, so let's talk about what receptive language is. We're going to start with the actual definition, and then hopefully I can make some fun of it. Receptive language, the process of attending to communication, spoken or nonverbal, comprehending the communication, and being able to react appropriately within a specified time parameter, even when what is being conveyed contains multiple facets. All right. What I love about that definition is that it wasn't full of jargon, but it's a lot. It's like, what are you trying to say to me? Can we pare this down? So let's take a look at our working definition and see what it is pared down. It's the child or the individual's ability to understand what's being said to them. So when a teacher says to you, your child's receptive language needs work, and they're not, they're not performing up to standards with receptive language. Basically, that's a whole host of things that they're saying. They're saying that when I am standing up in front of the classroom and I am saying to the other kids, take out your books and turn to page 32, your child isn't doing it. When I say, let's all line up at the door, your child isn't doing it. When I say, can you pick up your pencil and put it on the paper, your child isn't doing it. Now, as a former school teacher, I'm going to say to you that a lot of times people confuse receptive language with a whole lot of other stuff, right? Some of our kids truly are behind in receptive language. And so receptive is what you take in and understand. Expressive is what you send out. And, it's never even for anybody, not just people on the spectrum, for anyone. So you and I, if we were to be tested for receptive and expressive language, I can tell you that my expressive language would be up here and my receptive language would be here, right? Because I am more expressive than I am receptive. I need to work on listening. Right? And I can work on listening to you're never going to be 100% even with anything, right? But I can work on listening instead of just being expressive, right? For a lot of our kids, not all of them, their expressive language is lower than where it needs to be. And sometimes the receptive is too, but sometimes the receptive is up here. And they're hearing and understanding everything, but we don't know it because they're not expressing that they know it. But some of our kids have other issues. Some of them have a processing delay, which means, and I believe that I am in this category, somebody says something and it takes them a minute to decode it, a minute longer than other people. Maybe it's a second, maybe it's a minute, right? So it's almost like they're on a, and I say this, I've said this my whole life, that sometimes I'm on a tape delay when somebody says something to me. They'll say something and my head is still processing the last thing, and then I go, wait, and I don't say, can you repeat that? Although sometimes I do, and go, oh, he just said this. Oh, right? And then the light bulb comes on and then I react. But so I am sometimes slow to react because it's taking me longer for that message to decode than it does for other people. Some of our kids literally have an issue where they cannot decode the sounds. That in the English language, we have diphthongs and triphthongs. I don't want to give you a big speech and language lecture here, but we have vowel sounds that are complicated. When you say the word hour, you're going through a bunch of different sounds, and the brain has to be able to decode that. And when you think about the word hour, right, first they have to be able to decode that, and then your brain has to decide which hour are we talking about, the hour on the clock, or it's ours, it belongs to us, it's our book, right? That's a lot for a brain to do. By the way, you can strengthen that. You can absolutely strengthen the ear's ability to decode triphthong sounds. You absolutely can. But when a teacher is telling you that your child has receptive language things, you're just a hop, skip, and a jump from them saying your child isn't compliant and that your child is engaging in challenging behavior. Because if you're not compliant in the classroom, teachers don't have time. So this is why we have to pay attention to receptive language. We have to know, think of it as a big category, right? That they're not listening and responding. We need to go in and figure out why. Is it a processing delay? Is it a processing disorder? Is it an ear issue? Are they actually able to hear the sounds, and then are they able to decode them, especially those vowel sounds? That's a whole other thing. But there's great hope, and people can strengthen all of those skills, but you have to know what it is you're strengthening, right? So when the teacher throws this at you and says, your child's receptive language, blah, 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 I ask them, what's happening? And know exactly what's happening. Then go back to your team and say, so this is what the teacher is saying is happening. And there are ways that they can strengthen all of that. But the whole thing about, take your book and, open it to page 32, there are big fixes for that. I'm an ex-classroom teacher. And I can tell you, I've watched so many colleagues. There's really good teachers out there, right? But there's teachers who haven't had enough training too. And they look at a kid who exhibits challenging behavior, and that's a lot of times what they just see is, you're preventing me from educating. It's so sad to me, because sometimes what we need to do is look at what is preventing us from being able to connect with that child, right? What's in the way? And it's never the child's fault. It just isn't. That's what I love about ABA. ABA comes from that point of view and says it's never the child's fault. How are we teaching? Do we need to change our teaching methods so that we can reach that child? Well, then let's do that. Let's absolutely do that, because everyone can learn. Every living thing on this planet learns and grows. So that includes people who are on the autism spectrum. Let's find a better way to teach this child, right? But a lot of times kids just get labeled difficult and a problem. And I'm talking kindergarten. They're like, oh, that kid won't sit still. Well, that kid may have more stuff going on internally. But if you say that kid won't sit still and I can only teach him if he sits still, you're losing somebody right from kindergarten, and then they're going to go to first grade and be behind. I know I'm getting on a soapbox here, but for all the parents that are out there who have kids that are in school, if a teacher says your child has receptive language issues, get them to nail it down and get them help and support. Don't let them be labeled somebody who doesn't want to be in the classroom, because that will become who your child is. Who wants to be in a classroom when you can't understand what's being said? Who would want to sit there and sit still if you can't decode what's happening around you, right? So this is how these terms really grow and help us. That's our jargon for the day. Now, moving on, we always have a question of the day for you. Our question today, by the way, you can answer this on Facebook if you are of a mind to. We have a question, a preference assessment for you today. What do you prefer? Do you prefer gifts or praise? We've talked before on the show about how there are many languages of love. Well, there's many languages of reinforcement. And what you like may not be what your child likes, may not be what your spouse likes, may not be what your boss likes. What makes you happy? Would you rather that somebody give you a gift, or would you rather somebody give you, you are so great, you are so awesome? And do you like both? But which one do you like more, and what would you rather have? Because here's the thing. We all have preferences. And when you think that you're rewarding somebody and think that you're showering them, you might be praising them on a regular basis, but what they prefer is gifts. That's what makes them feel loved. You can tell me I'm wonderful, but you didn't get me a birthday present. I have a friend who's like that. I'm not that way. I got to be honest with you. We were just talking with somebody the other day who was saying, that I don't want to give anything away, but somebody was saying to me that they wanted to propose to somebody, but they're not going to because they don't have the ring. And I was like, oh, is that important to her? And he was like, no, she's already said, if you're waiting to get a ring, I wish you wouldn't. I wish you would propose. And I was like, you should listen to that. You should listen to what she's saying because you think the ring is a big deal because you've seen that on other women. But that's not who you're proposing. So you should know who you're proposing to. Somebody was talking about something for Mother's Day and they were like, so did you get the flowers? Did you get the chocolate? And I was like, no, my husband knows me. I love flowers, but they die. And I'm allergic to chocolate. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I prefer the praise, but I know a lot of people prefer the gifts. So what are you doing to reinforce yourself? What are you doing to reinforce your child? What are you doing to reinforce the people who are significant in your life? And are you telling them what you prefer? What do you prefer? What really makes the difference for you? So there we go. Something to think about. Please write in and tell us. And then think about, hey, so if that's what makes me tick, am I automatically doing that for other people and not realizing, oh, wait a second, for them, it's more other things. Good thing to know, especially for our kiddos. And then we always have a topic for the week. And our topic this week, I love this, it kind of goes with our whole leaf pattern, is what do you love to do in the fall? What's your favorite thing to do in the fall? I'm on this kick right now about we don't have time to do everything. And especially if we have kiddos with autism, our days are full. And even, when you're at the point where I'm at, where my kiddo is doing well and I'm not in that battle every day, that I'm there with you guys, trying to help as many parents as I can before I retire, right? It's the thing I wake up to. It's the thing I go to sleep. There's people that I want to help. I want to still live my life and we all want to have the things that we do with our family, but you can't do everything. You got to pick and choose. And I think it's important to enjoy the season. So if you're going to pick one thing that's fall to you, one thing that makes you happy, one thing that will make you feel in the spirit of the season, what would it be? I do love me some Hallmark movies, but I love in Hallmark movies how it's whenever they have seasonal movies and it's like they have the prerequisite, okay, we have to do the apple picking in the movie. Okay, we have to have at least one scene where we're throwing leaves at each other, right? They have this for every season, and then for the Christmas ones, it's like, we must go ice skating. Check that box. And the truth is, in real life, a lot of times, if you're living your life, and if you're taking care of business, you don't have time to do all that. So I'm asking you, what's the one thing? What is the one thing? For us, it used to be that there was a pumpkin patch that we went to every year, and they had these ginormous pumpkins, and we would always take a picture. And we featured some of the pumpkin pictures here on the show before. And it burned a couple of years ago. The pumpkin patch is no longer there, so we've had to find other things. And it's okay because my son is older, and the people who owned the farm have said, no, it was time for them to retire. Sometimes things have a way of changing the way they're supposed to. But I'm saying, find the thing. Make the one thing, make your stand, schedule it. Make time for it. Buy the things that you have to get, if there's things that you have to get to make it happen, and enjoy the fall. It's not officially fall yet. That's why I'm asking you to think about it right now, because you don't want it to get past you. But what's the one thing that you want to do? And it can be something that you do on your own. It can be something you do as a family, something you do with your friends, but let's put some energy towards that. Let's make sure that you stop and enjoy the fall. I was going to say smell the roses, but it's more like smelling the leaves, right? Okay, so what we have on the show today, we're running a little bit late, but we have the fabulous Bonnie Yates, who's going to be answering some questions that you guys have written in. And then we've been featuring really wonderful moms. We've got a wonderful mom that I want to feature and have her tell you a little bit about her story because I think it's inspirational. So Raquel is going to be with us, and that's going to round out our show. If we have time, We will try to get to a mindfulness moment because we didn't have time for that on Thursday, but I don't know if we're going to have time. I'm just going to be honest. So in any case, we're going to take a break and we're going to come back with the fabulous Bonnie Yates. Stick with us.
Hey, I'm Candace Cameron Bray.
Tom Bergeron.
You're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
You're watching Autism Live.
Do you provide care services to someone with autism? Recently, more and more children are being diagnosed with the condition and getting the support they need as awareness grows. But what happens to these children as they grow up? It's estimated that over 500,000 youth with autism will turn 18 in the next decade, and they'll be faced with a very difficult reality. As children with autism grow up, their services start to disappear or become very difficult to access. Things like medical care, mental health counseling, vocational training, and more. All services that are still desperately needed. The loss of support that youth with autism face as they grow up is so severe that it's referred to in the autism community as falling off a cliff. Adults with autism need the same level of support they had as children to avoid falling off the services cliff. Introducing Skills Living, the web-based software designed specifically to help transitioning youth and adults with autism so they can avoid the cliff and instead fly to success. With Skills Living, help your learner with autism develop the skills they need in all the critical areas of adult life, including self-control, planning, and problem-solving, effective communication, performing life skill tasks for independent living, acquiring and maintaining employment or other meaningful activities, developing and maintaining social skills and relationships, accessing transportation and public services, and being safe. Skills Living includes a comprehensive assessment, a data collection mobile app, behavior intervention plan builder, and automatic progress reporting. It also provides a complete curriculum addressing 16 key areas spanning the entire range of functioning adulthood. Skills Living is easy to use and can be implemented by schools, parents, and autism service providers. Call or click today for your free demo and see how Skills Living can help your learner with autism avoid the cliff and instead reach their fullest potential. Skills Living. Wish, learn, become.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are joined right now by the wonderful and fabulous Bonnie Yates. She's a special education attorney. She's coming to us from the law firm of Hirji and Chow. Good morning, Bonnie. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about Hirji and Chow.
Hirji and Chow, God, we are a very busy law firm with school starting up again. It just seems like we've got a bunch of different things going on. But what we do is special education. We represent parents. We assist them with regional center matters. We assist them with higher education matters. We assist, college students with getting their accommodations and things that they need for college. We do disability discrimination. I think that's pretty much, we're kind of a, full stop kind of special education law firm with, different interests and 6 attorneys that have different expertises. So it's fun because there's always a lot of stuff going on, expulsions, just due process hearings. So that's what we do. On Autism Live, I'm answering general questions, and I'm answering them based on my knowledge of California and federal law, but I'm really not giving legal advice. I'm giving you information about your rights. And if you have a specific legal problem, you really need to find an attorney and in your own state who can advise you. So I usually direct people to COPA, www.copa.net. You can get a list of special education attorneys in your own state. And we do offer, for anyone in Southern California, if you have a question and you think we can answer it, we will schedule a complimentary consultation with you where we can have a specific discussion about your problem. But you'll see today, we're definitely answering specific questions, but we're answering them in a general way. And specific questions ultimately need to be answered specifically.
Absolutely. So thank you for all of that, and thank you to Hirji and Chow for lending us your time for this hour. I'm going to jump right in with some of the questions that we have, Bonnie, because we have quite a few. Somebody wrote in and said, where can I go to find what my rights are? Is there a place that lists our rights as parents? Is there a book or training you recommend? I feel like the school district is capitalizing on our collective ignorance. What a great question.
Well, you got that right. That's exactly right. You're in a situation that they've, the playing field is one they've played on 1,000 times before, and, for you, you're just getting up to speed. There's an excellent book called Rights Law, WRIGHTSLAW, which I think is a really good book for parents. And then and you can find them on the web as well, and there's a lot of stuff, just even if you look up Rights Law online. For free stuff, the California Department of Education has an online book that basically compiles the relevant education code and California Code of Regulations, or California Administrative Code regulations that are relevant to special education in California, so you can get that online and print it out. There's California Dyslexia Guidelines, which is a State Department of Ed publication that you can print out that's very important if you have a child with specific learning disability. And then Disability Rights of California, DRC, they have a lot of really good stuff online. There's something called Student Educational Rights and Responsibilities, SERR, and they go through the questions. They have like a multi-chapter book on questions that you have about special ed, and they will instruct you on the law in a particular area. So let's say you want to know about your right to obtain records. They will have a question and a 2-page discussion about your rights as far as records. So I think where the problems come in is when the district doesn't play by the rules, which is most of the time, unfortunately. So when the district doesn't play by the rules, it's not always easy to get from a book exactly what you need to do. But sometimes what you need to do is you need to go back to them and quote the source. So if you ask for your records and they say they'll be ready in 30 days, you say, no, they won't. They'll be ready in 5 business days, because that's what California Education Code, section whatever it is, 56.3 something, says. And you have to put that in writing, because if you don't write it down, it's as if it never happened. And you can start creating a paper trail. So the problem is that when you go to an IEP meeting, you need a simultaneous translation so that you have what the district is saying and then somebody translating and saying, this actually means X. And that's the hard part, and you only, learn that through further education. Now, I looked at this little thing that Fagan Friedman and Fulfrost put out, which was a slideshow about special education. And they had a whole section on like red flags when parents are, becoming a problem. And they had things like requesting records, wanting to bring an attorney. They basically, anything that, asking to record the meeting. These are all rights that people have. So it was interesting that the district looked at these rights as problems for them that would better advantage the parents in terms of representing themselves. I had a client that was bringing her educational psychologist to the meeting because she needed interpretation of what was being said. And then the special education, the program specialist took her aside and said, you're asking to record the meetings, you're bringing this, person in with you, and basically said, why are you lawyering up on us, and started putting pressure on her. So I don't see that, but I assume it goes on all the time, telling people don't record the meeting, it's going to make this adversarial, It's so important to record the meetings. It's so important, and you don't get a do-over. So if somebody says something brilliant in the meeting that's going to let you win the case, God, you sure kicked yourself if you aren't recording. So that's kind of my answer generally to those questions. A lot of the time, like this morning, for wanting to talk to you about unilateral private placements, private school placements, I wanted to look at the private placement statute. So I just put in like unilateral private placement, and I put in the federal statute because I know the number, but I didn't even bother to go to Westlaw, and up it pops. So whatever else isn't great about being a special ed parent in this day and age, and believe me, there's a lot, as you all know, we have a lot more information on the internet. You just have to be a little careful because some of it is soliciting business and some of it is inaccurate, but a lot of it is useful and it's free, and so go for it.
Okay. All right, so I want to move on to this next question. School is offering TK, transitional kindergarten. My child is turning 5 this month. I am thinking of having him do an intensive ABA program instead, and we would start kindergarten at 6. Is that possible?
Great question. It is possible. Education is not compulsory in California until age 6. When I get a 3-year-old in the office and I can tell the parents, don't bother yourself with the IEP process. Do full-time ABA through your insurance for 2 years and then reconsider school. I'm like so happy I'm skipping down the street. Perfectly legal.
Okay.
Highly advisable.
Yes.
Public preschool, not going to get your child with autism to where he needs to be by age 5 or 6.
And we should note that is, but once they're 6, you got to arrange something school-wise. They either have to go to school or be homeschooled or have a medical exemption for some reason. So that 5 to 6, that may be their last opportunity to hit this as hard as that we know that they need to hit it.
At 6, if you're insured, we're still paying for the ABA. In California, all you have to do is fill out a private school affidavit in the month of October, and then your home becomes a private school.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Medical exemption, if you were on home hospital, for some reason, that would trump the truancy laws. But you don't need to have a medical exemption. You just need to have a private school in your home, and we help people set those up all the time. If you wanted to set one up today, you couldn't even file something with the state because the state won't accept the filing except beginning October 1st.
That's wild.
So if you got truancy calls, the response would be, well, my child's in private school now.
There you go. Okay, moving on to the next question. This parent writes in and says, okay, 4 days into school and my child has come home with a bruise.
I hate these kinds of questions.
Right? She goes on to say he's 8, has an ASD diagnosis, and is nonverbal. I picked him up and noticed he was holding his hand in his armpit, but I didn't make him remove it. When we got home and he was still doing it, I made him show me his hand, and there is a big bruise on the back of his hand. I called the school and they're saying that it didn't happen there. It must have happened in the car on the way home. I am furious and scared. What do I do?
Well, the reason I said I hate these kinds of questions is because I'm frustrated about how much there is to do. The school's supposed to give you an incident report, but we have these contentions all the time that it happened outside of school. All you can do is document it clearly to the principal and explain that when you picked him up, this is the condition you found him in, and so it's obvious that this didn't happen on the way home, and demand that they investigate. That's all you can do. And
Yeah.
until it's 3 or 4 or 5 times, you really just don't have that much recourse.
And I gotta say, you know, it's like terrible when we as parents have to become forensic experts to testify to things, but it seems like to me that a bruise would take longer than a car trip home to develop. If you hit your hand right before getting into the car, a bruise doesn't come up that quickly.
Good point.
I would be calling those people back and saying, I need the incident report and I'm going to call my lawyer because you're telling me it didn't happen on your watch and I can prove that it did because I documented that I saw it at this time and a bruise doesn't come up that quick. I hate that.
I think that's great advice. I think she said even when she picked him up, he had his,
Yeah, he was holding it. Yeah.
So I assumed that it was already bruised. And certainly if she wants to throw in that, she's getting her lawyer involved, that's going to put them on notice. My question is just, are they going to just cover up stuff or are they going to become more careful?
Yeah, well, and then there's the whole thing, because as a parent, I go, do I send him back to the place where they're saying it didn't happen and I know that it did? And, that's where it gets squishy for me, Bonnie, because I don't know that I could. If I thought for an instant that my child was being hurt at school and that nobody was
noticing. About intentionally hurt. You're not talking about falling down on the playground and getting...
No, I'm saying even if he fell down on the playground, and hurt himself. If my child, if we've got an 8-year-old who's going to school with ASD, someone should have eyes on that child at some point. And if he fell on the playground and nobody noticed it and nobody made an incident report, to me, that's a form of neglect. Like, I would be like, are you watching him?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, that's a very, very valid question. And it, you know, also should be mentioned that in California, if you want to sue a public entity for personal injuries, you have to file a government claim within 180 days of the incident, or else you're barred from suing them. Or another way you could get their attention would be to fill in the government claim. And assuming you're in California, you have to call the school, like you have to, not school, but you have to call the district risk management people and find out, do they have a district specific form that you need to fill in? And it's basically a 2-page form with what happened, what date was it, and who are the witnesses. And that puts them on notice that you're contemplating a lawsuit.
Yeah. And I got to say, because I want to make sure that I say this, that, you know, I used to be a classroom teacher, and the one day that my child got the most injured at a school, I just happened to be there. It was right before a Christmas concert that they were going to do, and I just happened to be there. I walked around behind the auditorium because I was talking to somebody before the thing was starting. My son saw me and came running across the playground, and his aide was with him, but they had just rolled up a carpet because they were taking it to be cleared, and it was outside, and one part of it didn't get all the way rolled up, and my son came running to me. I didn't see it. He tripped, fell forward, hit and cut his face, his glasses broke. He was black and blue by the end of the day. You would have thought that somebody beat the holy you-know-what out of him. I happened to have been there and watched the entire thing. So I saw what happened. I saw that my kid tripped. And, you know, I don't think he even cried. He was like, stunned for a second. But I saw the whole thing. I can tell you, if he had come home, how I saw him later, I would have been so petrified. I know that things happen in school. A bruise does not necessarily mean that something nefarious has happened. But I would be wanting somebody to tell me, how did this happen?
Yeah, that's the mistake the district makes in a lot of cases, is they're afraid that they're going to make more work for themselves, so they do nothing. You know, I mean, if you analogize it to like being a medical practitioner, it's the difference between somebody saying, we did this, it was our error, we made a mistake, it's not going to happen again, and sort of this vacuum of silence, you know, when you know something.
It's your kid.
happened.
You got to know. You got to know what happened, and they need to answer you. Okay, so moving on to the next one. What do I do when someone at the school loudly discloses my child's diagnosis in front of a bunch of parents? I realize it can't be undone, but I think that this person should be reprimanded.
Is this another parent, we're assuming?
Yes, I am assuming that it's a parent, and because she says, disclose my child's diagnosis in front of a bunch of parents.
Well, I guess it really depends on whether you want there to be learning or you just want revenge. You know,
Can we get the answer for both?
Yeah, I mean, if you want revenge, you have to publicly shame them. You have to go up to them in a public context and dress them down and tell them how improper that was, and that they need to understand that these things are confidential, and how would they like it if the table were turned on them. All that's going to do is make that person hate disabled people and discriminate against them more. So I would try to create an opportunity where I could actually have a dialogue with the person that might lead to something constructive, to explain about the disability, to explain that it's treatable, to explain that the child is getting better, to explain how much discrimination there is and how important it is for his therapy and improvement, that he be accepted into the community and he'd be allowed to socialize with typical peers. I would try for that. And I mean, the other thing you can do is you can ask for something to be done at the school level, class-wide, so it's not your responsibility and you're not singled out. But, you know, I don't think you make people more accepting about disabilities by calling them out, even what they did was wrong. I think if it's another parent and not a school teacher or something like that, there might be a way to engage with them that would actually lead to something more positive. But you have to be up for doing that.
Well, I love hearing that very adult answer, Miss Bonnie, because we all need to hear that. Because we need to remember what is it that I'm trying to do. If I just want to get even with this person, great. But if I want to create an environment in which my child's going to thrive, maybe there's a different answer. So I love that. Thank you for.
We're in a bubble with our disabled children and clients and friends and things like that. But I remember what I was like before I had a child with a disability, and I was ignorant and fearful. And I always tell the story, when there was an attempt to put a group home for autistic adults on my block. And I organized my neighbors to try to keep that agency out of starting a group home in my neighborhood because I thought it was like creepy and scary. And lo and behold, karmically, about a year later or two or whatever, I had a child with autism. So we forget that people that have been fortunate enough, if you think it's fortunate, maybe it's actually fortunate that we have the awareness, but people that don't have a sensitivity for disabilities don't understand how painful it is to have your child be marginalized, put down, left out,
Yeah. No,
So,
absolutely.
so is the net result of this that we have no time to talk about private placement?
No, we had one more question, but we can
Okay.
talk about private placement.
No, we're
Should
going
we
to
have-
do private placement next week.
Okay, so the last question was, my daughter has high functioning autism. She is in the 10th grade. We moved and we did not disclose her diagnosis. She started school 2 weeks ago. Things were going fine, and then she had a meltdown. In the course of sorting it out, I disclosed her diagnosis, and now they are saying she has to go to a different school and a special day class. She did not have an IEP at her last school, didn't need it, or a 504. She performs at grade level, all A's and B's. She didn't hurt anyone in her meltdown, just cried inconsolably in the girls' bathroom. Can they kick us out?
The answer to that is no, but this is kind of an emergency situation, and I would actually like to talk more directly with this parent if they're in California, because there are some things that she probably needs to do. And unfortunately, to protect her child, she probably needs to ask for an IEP on the grounds that her child does have a disability, and it is having some interfering effect. And she has, if you're suspected of having a disability, the district can't change your placement the way they're trying to change it. So there would be some things to do to prevent that.
Okay.
I understand the family may not ultimately want to end up with an IEP for her, and that's fine, but I think you have to initiate the process, because otherwise, I don't know what their rules are on moving her, and it might be possible to move her, I don't know, but there's got to be due process. There has to be notice to this family in writing. And the last time I had one of these, the child did have an IEP, but the teacher was trying to move the child from her class without an IEP meeting. I got involved and it shut it right down. So Shannon, maybe you can find out where that parent is, and then
Okay.
we can do a little bit more
So
outreach to her.
if that parent, he or she, is in Southern California, they definitely should have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
if
And
they-
like
yeah.
tomorrow,
Okay. If they are out of state, and so I'm saying this because I don't know where the parent
they
is.
need a lawyer and they need to go through COPA, because I don't have any other way to find special ed attorneys out of state, and they need to do
Okay.
something very quickly. But
Okay.
this is not this is preventable.
All right. Fabulous.
And people do have emotional self-regulation difficulties, and for some kids, they have an IEP strictly for counseling. She might need that. Why should this kid have to bear, the difficulty of having a really she should be getting help coping at school. That's what
Absolutely.
she shouldn't have to have her meltdown be so humongous. So.
Right.
That in and of itself could generate a 504 plan or an IEP. Bear in mind, under 504, they can change your placement. So really, unless you have an IEP, your placement isn't protected
Okay.
for general ed placement or any other placement.
All right. Now they are telling me that we're out of time, Bonnie.
Okay.
So we will save the other topic for next week, but I appreciate you greatly. Can you tell us where we can reach your Ji and Chow?
The phone is 310-391-0330. The website is www.lawyer4, and that's number 4children.com.
Okay. And we appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will hear more from you next week.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. Bye-bye. All right. We are going to take a break, and then we are going to come back with a wonderful, inspirational mom. Stick with us back after these messages.
What is autism?
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 I've been asking myself that for a very, very long time.
Let me think about that one.
Trying to just
Let me think. Oh man, that's a rough one. Yes.
Autism.
Autism is a neurological disorder that affects many of our kids in different ways.
It's a learning disability that affects the cognitive functions of the brain.
A lot of people have the misconception that it's a disability, and it's really not.
I look at it as like a special gift.
When one person thinks differently from another.
it's an opportunity for everyone to learn to understand someone that's a little different than them. Autism is the ability to educate.
They're given so much talent in different areas.
To me, autism means a chance to be with and be around people you really care about. Autism is beautiful.
It's a way of seeing the world differently.
Always unique, totally intelligent, and sometimes mysterious.
Happiness that comes out of my son's hard work.
It's a movement.
Unpredictable.
That's right.
Awesome. Love. The field I want to work in.
Laughter, fun, joy. Autism is beautiful to me.
I want you to remember these three words. There is hope.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We have joining us via Skype right now a really inspirational mom. Rachel Jones is joining us, and boy, has she got a story to tell. So Rachel, I've said that you are a very inspirational mom. I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about your story and how you identify yourself.
So I actually, when I was younger, was diagnosed as having a learning disability, and I was in special education. After I graduated from high school, I went on to college. I got an associate's degree in graphic design. Art's been a passion for me, but I didn't feel that I was getting what I needed from that. I'm more of a helping person, and I didn't feel I was helping anyone. So I started looking into other career opportunities. I like working with children, so I ended up getting a job as a one-to-one for a student with autism, and I had never worked with anyone with autism. I didn't know anything about autism. My student had gone through 2 teaching assistants it was only September still. He had self-injurious behavior, and it was really difficult for a lot of the staff to work with that, just because it's so hard to see someone hurting and not be able to do something about it. And I started working with a student, and I felt an instant connection, and I was fascinated by him. I was fascinated by the ways that we were able to communicate. I could use my art skills to communicate with him, and we just really connected. And I started working with CARD on being trained for ABA therapy. And what I learned and what I saw and the ways that I was able to help my student were so tremendous that I fell in love and kind of went very deep into learning everything I could learn about autism, trying to be the best therapist I could be. I worked with the supervisor, Denise, that works with my student now, or my child now, and I was very envious of her, of the skill level that she had, of the ways that she connected with students, and I felt really passionate about the way that I connected with the students, coming from a background where I just didn't ever feel like I knew where I belonged in school growing up. Connecting with other people was very difficult at times. There were times that I felt sort of victimized, but I didn't understand what caused people to see me as a victim or to bully me. And seeing what these kids have to go through and what they've dealt with helped me to look at things in a different light and realize I have a lot of protective factors. I have a lot working for me. They deserve my best. So it prompted me to seek more services for myself, to get therapy, to look at what I need to do to get myself in a better situation so that I can provide the absolute best care for my students and not put demands on them or expectations that I can't fulfill myself. If I expect something of someone, I have to know that I can do that and that I pushed myself that hard. Otherwise, I will not ask someone to work as hard as I am, I have to be able to work that hard too. So working with the students pushed me really hard, and also at the same time, I started picking up on the things that we were doing in ABA, a lot of the social things, pieces that I was missing. And as I was teaching my students, I was really taking that into consideration of how do I interact with people, how do I interact with my world and my environment, what skills am I teaching them that I really have to work on myself. And I think that was a huge part of me becoming more successful. Their success and my success was very tied together. The more successful my students were, the more respected I was by my peers and my colleagues, the more I started hearing people say things like, where did you get your master's degree? And I said, I don't have one. And where did you get your bachelor's degree? I don't have one. And my coworkers were saying, what are you doing? You have a gift, you have a skill. Among my family, when I would go home, that's all I talked about was autism, autism this, autism that. A lot of my friends and family would say, well, you kind of do that. And, you are, you have that behavior too. I started looking at myself and looking at my family and realizing, my father has a lot of symptoms of autism. He scripts. When he's driving, he's reading signs. He can't filter information very easily in a crowded environment. It sort of became like a little bit of a joke. Oh, we have autism in our family. We're probably somewhere on that spectrum. A lot of people are. It wasn't until I saw it in my son, and I kind of use an analogy with autism that if autism was a person, it's a shadow of a person that I've seen at its worst and I've seen at its best, and you can't really love a person without seeing them at their worst and their best and taking it all together. And I've seen it both. I've seen it at its worst and at its best. And when I saw it in my son, and you become familiar with a person that you know that well. So that shadow of autism, I can see a little bit of it in a person. I can see a lot of it in a person. It depends on what I see. But I saw a little shadow of it in my son, and then I started questioning. Okay, well, am I really seeing this, or is it because this is what I do and this is what I look for? Am I seeing it where it doesn't exist? So I think that delayed him getting a diagnosis a little bit. When he was 3, it kind of got to the point where I realized he's hitting his milestones developmentally, but he's not using language in a really functional way. He is not adapting to his environment the way that a neurotypical child would. So I said, I think it's time, and we went and got him his diagnosis. And when we went to Strong to get the diagnosis, I brought my mother with me, and when they were asking questions about Gage, she kept answering them about me, and I had to keep saying, Mom, this is really about him. This is not about how I presented as a child. But the more she brought things up and the more I looked back on my childhood and saw the similarities, I thought, I think I'm autistic. And that is how I identify myself. When I'm working in a professional environment, I use person-first language, but I do identify myself as autistic, and I because I do take the good and the bad with that. It is part of who I am, and I think that's a really individual choice how people want to use that language. Some people don't want to be defined by it. I don't feel that I am defined by it, but I think that it is an integral part of who I am, and it gives me a lot of my gifts and strengths and protective factors, as well as setbacks and challenges. So it's been a really kind of a wild ride to go from an autism professional working with children and adults in vocational settings, in the classroom, in people's homes, doing parent advocacy and being on that professional end of things. And then to go from that to getting a diagnosis and being an autism mom, which to me was a very different experience than a typical parent who maybe doesn't have experience with autism. For me, it was Not very stressful. I could understand where his level was and what his trajectory was going to be very similar to mine. I felt that he had obviously more protective factors than I did because he has a mom who has a lot of experience and knowledge and knows the resources. And then kind of coming full circle as a person with autism and being able to look back at my childhood and how I presented and the challenges that I had. It's interesting for us as a family to look at it. My father has terrible school aversion to the point where to him coming back and being reincarnated and coming back to school is like hell for him. He really, really wished that he could have gotten services when he was in school and been able to understand that he learns differently. That's all there was to it. And Gage at least will have that growing up, and it's really important to me that he's going to have that growing up. I was very fortunate. My mom was in special education, was a teaching assistant, and she reinforced with me really regularly, you learn differently, you're going to have to work a lot harder than everybody else. And no, it's not fair. It's just the way that it is.
It's a remarkable story. We should mention that you have experience as a New York State certified special education teacher, a teaching assistant, an ABA therapist, behavior support specialist, and you've been a volunteer and a parent advocate at IEP meetings. You are the winner of the 2014 Beverly F. Engel Excellence in Education Award. You have a bachelor's now in social work. So you know, you have a string of accomplishments both behind you and in front of you, I know. But just so that we catch up now to this story, so your child has a formal diagnosis at this point.
Yes.
Did you, because I know a lot of adults, it's a very interesting thing when they start to realize, okay, this might, and boy, you're not the first parent that we've had on the show that didn't realize that perhaps they were on the spectrum until their child was being diagnosed and seeing the similarities. And some decide to go get the formal diagnosis and some don't. Did you actually go then and get evaluated?
I did. One of the main reasons that prompted me to go get an evaluation is I do work in the mental health setting. I frequently see clients coming through that have symptoms of autism, and they're treated separately, individually. Those symptoms, it's never really thought of as these people could have autism and might benefit from knowing that about themselves and being able to explore that. There's a lack of knowledge in the medical community about what autism looks like in individuals who function at a level where they didn't get diagnosed when they were younger. A really well-meaning colleague that I respect very highly at one point had said to me when they were making a referral that the patient, I had said the patient sounds like they might have autism, and she had said, no, I talked to him. And that kind of sat strange with me, and I thought for a moment, well, but you're talking to me right now too, and we work together on a daily basis. That doesn't mean that you would know that I have autism. And I did not have a diagnosis at that time, and it prompted me thinking, I need to do better. This is another area where I need to do better and as an advocate, and go and have the evaluation. I was sort of the mind that I would probably be more of that broader phenotype and not actually get a diagnosis. I know that when I was younger, if I had gone, I absolutely would have had a diagnosis, but I didn't know, with all my compensatory strategies, do I still present as a person with autism? And I had the evaluation, and I found it kind of interesting to look at my day-to-day activities and how many things I ignore or disregard people around me might pick up on. People that I interact with professionally would not notice, but people who live with me notice. I carry transitional objects when I'm nervous. I have a lot of little habits and quirks, and when you look at all of that together, you realize, oh, I guess I do qualify for a diagnosis, and I have found really good ways to cope. And knowing that about yourself really helps you put yourself in the perspective of how can I help other people? How can I make these coping mechanisms more functional and less noticeable so that you can function in a professional environment? But also, I want to be able to say to people that respect me and know me, I have autism. So you might need to change the way that you think about autism. You might need to think more about the ways that you use language to describe people with autism, and make sure that you're using language in a way that helps to really describe their abilities and their challenges in a clear way. So we're not using words like high functioning. High functioning is relative to what you know about autism. And that's a big problem in the medical community, is that people will make referrals, oh, high functioning autism, but what does that mean really? What does high functioning mean? There are neurotypical people who are very low functioning. So it depends on what you're looking at. How well is someone functioning in the workplace? Are they getting along with their coworkers versus do they need a supportive environment? We need better language around that so that we can make sure that we're getting people the care that they need. There's a big shortage especially in New York, of mental health care opportunities for people with autism. There aren't a lot of mental health practitioners. It's kind of everything separate. Mental health and OPWDD is separate. Behaviorists are very separate from mental health professionals. There needs to be a little bit more of that coming together and realizing that having a diagnosis is extremely helpful for the individual. It doesn't have to be something that's stigmatized, and it's something that should be explored in terms of language and how do we communicate, how do we look at the whole person instead of treating individual mental health symptoms when this is not really necessarily a mental health diagnosis, but there are a lot of coping strategies that the people could benefit from. And whether it's in the education system, whether it's in mental health, I think that from my experience, there are a lot of interventions that work for people with autism that can also largely benefit neurotypical people, but we don't use them because there's no diagnosis. So what is it about a diagnosis that makes those services available, and how do we broaden that so that people are getting the same level of care?
Well, you are amazing, and you are such a breath of fresh air. I'm sure that you know that there's a great deal of controversy that swarms around the term autism mom. That there, look, and for years, it's a term that I have used to describe myself because everybody else was, and I don't know, I'm an intelligent person, but that's how I describe myself. And then through a bunch of different things, about a year ago, I started going, wait a second. I think because I'm meeting more and more moms that the description is more apt, right? That because, and you know, I do a one-woman show called the Autism Monologues. In it, and in it, there is somebody who says, autism mom, it's the only group of people who have ever defined themselves, their name, by the diagnosis of something that their child has been diagnosed with. Like, it really doesn't make entire sense. And there are moms who are coming to me now who have a diagnosis and have children, and they're like, I can't even describe myself with the words to describe myself. I'm a mom who has autism because this group of people is using this term inappropriately. But so you fit the description of what they say. You are a mom, and you are, you know, have a diagnosis on the spectrum, and you have a child on the spectrum. How do you, when you refer to yourself, is it even a part of it? Do you describe yourself as an autism mom? What do you say?
I do describe myself as an autism mom because I think another large piece of autism is so incredibly different than any other diagnosis because of what it does to the people around them. Being an autism mom, I think the reason why that diagnosis ends up at the beginning of how a parent describes himself is because autism changes all of the people around the person with autism.
Amen to that.
I have been in classrooms, elementary classrooms, where a child with autism was integrated and people talked about differences, and that child taught all of the other children how to be compassionate, how to be empathetic toward their peers. There was extremely low levels of bullying. There was extremely low levels of taunting or teasing. There was a high level of understanding. Things that kids would normally single out as different, they did not see anymore. So all of those children were changed by that one individual with autism. For me, I struggled with anxiety and depression. I had suffered multiple traumas when I was younger. I had a brother who was murdered. I had, and that part of that delayed my diagnosis probably as well. When I was struggling, people saw that more as a response to trauma versus coping with having autism. So I was really in a place in life where I was struggling and felt different, and I can honestly say that the child that I met, the first child that I worked with who had autism, saved my life, changed my life, gave me purpose. There was a connection there that you just can't, there aren't words to really describe it. And that is true also of parents of children with autism. You will learn to be an entirely different mom. Your child is getting the diagnosis, but you're not going to be the mom that you thought you were going to be either. You don't have the child that you planned on having. There's a grieving process for a lot of people. Autism moms are stronger than they ever thought they would be. They are people who persevere, that feel connectedness to other autism moms. I understand that it is a bizarre thing to have a diagnosis in front of the word mom, but I think it is because the diagnosis becomes so much a part of your family, and the apple doesn't usually fall that far from the tree. So autism is a part of your family. It's a part of the person that you love, and I think moms do take that good with the bad. A lot of moms who have children who are really, really struggling with the diagnosis might say, I really hate autism. There are people that say that, and there are two very clear, distinct camps. From what I see on social media a lot, there are individuals who are consider themselves high functioning, don't want to be lumped in necessarily with the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. There was a lot of controversy when that was split up in the DSM, or rejoined in the DSM under autism spectrum disorder rather than Asperger's and autism. It's tricky because, like I said, it's that shadow of a person. There's the good and there's the bad that goes with that. It depends on what face of autism are you seeing. But I do define myself as an autism mom. I defined myself as an autism mom before I got the diagnosis. It's an elite group of people that support each other. It is a badge of honor in a lot of ways. I think whenever someone struggles really, really hard with something and comes through it, it is a badge of honor. It's a badge of honor that you have this really, really special child with their challenges, but also their gifts and what they bring to the world. One of the first parents that I had worked with talked a lot with me about a loss of faith and a really difficult grieving process when their child was diagnosed. And I didn't want to overstep, but I had to let them know, your child has a purpose in life. Your child is going to have struggles. Everybody does. Your child is going to be someone that you worry about. All moms worry about their children. There's going to be very specific things that are going to be different for you, but your child's changing you and your child changed me. And that's needed. These children are needed in the world. These adults are needed in the world. They're a part of society that changes society in much for the better. So I think it should really be an individual choice. How you identify, whether you use person-first language, whether you identify as autistic or as an ASB or an autism mom, I think that's really personal and really individual. But it's tricky. When you get into the language, it does get really tricky and controversial for a lot of reasons. And I think a lot of people who are higher functioning on the spectrum have a deep sense of pride because their autism comes with more gifts than setbacks. So they see it as being different. I'm different and I'm unique and I can think of things in a different way than you can. It makes me a good problem solver. It makes me a good employee. I'm highly focused when I have a task in front of me or a problem I need to solve. There are a lot of gifts that come with autism. For some people, there are just a lot of setbacks that come with autism. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of anguish. There's a lot of disappointment. I think that's why it's very difficult to nail down what's the political correct way to look at this. It's really individual. I think people need to reserve that right to cope with the way that makes them feel comfortable and identify in a way that makes them feel comfortable.
Rachel, you're amazing. I could talk to you all day. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I hope that you're writing a book, and I hope that I hope that you're doing speaking engagements because you're a voice that we need to hear in this community.
Thank you.
So, and if people, is there a place where people could get a hold of you if they wanted you to come speak to their group?
Sure. My email is roch, R-O-C-H, autismconnect@gmail.com.
Okay. I want to thank you so much for being with us because we said that you were an inspirational mom, and man, did you deliver on that. So thank you so much. I got to say this because I love saying that the tree doesn't fall far from the apple. I don't have a diagnosis, but I swear that I've got a sensory processing thing, and it's been driving me crazy the whole time behind you. It says it's August. I need you to change the little thing on your thing there to say September. I just wanted to interrupt you the whole time and go, it needs to say September, Rachel. So please do that for me. Okay. You know what we always say here, puppies don't have kittens. There we are. But I thank you so much for being with us, and I hope to meet you sometime in person.
Thank you. Thank you
for
having me.
Get my way around there. All right. Thanks so much for being here with us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And I'm just checking the time. We're totally out of time here. But I want to say to you guys, the rest of this week, here are some of the things that we have on. Tomorrow is a best of, which that interview will eventually be part of our best of because wasn't she amazing? Come on. On Wednesday, we have Dr. Granpeche, I'm told. Thursday, we have autism expert Amanda Kim who's going to be with us. And on Friday, we have Vince Redmond and author Jackie Folks is going to be with us. So all of that. Until then, give your kiddos a hug for me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.